Thank you so much. We want to make sure that we have a shared understanding of the various terms we use in literacy. So the first one is storytelling. Storytelling is your very typical telling stories, anything from telling someone what happened the other day, telling them what happened this morning when you bumped your toe and fell and cut yourself and you've got a plaster on your finger, to telling the story of one of your folklores and traditional stories that you have, to telling a story of Cinderella, the Three Little Pigs. So storytelling is a very important part of the development of literacy, and it's fundamental in developing literacy. However, if we don't take it to the next step, the child's never going to learn to read and write. So we have to be very, very proactive with the way we use storytelling. I am going to make sure that we've got the chat question and answer is open, so you can put in any of your questions in the Q&A at any time to make sure that I'm able to answer them. And we'll stop at 1:45, 1:40 we'll stop, and then I'll start addressing all your questions you might have, and then we can put in our screens, put in our videos, or you can just type a question. So you've got storytelling. Very, very important. And I'm going to give you whole examples of how to link storytelling and take it to the next level, as well as we never really stop telling stories. Hey, we're always telling stories, and we still tell stories. You come to work and tell stories of what happened the night before. You tell them about what you've done the night before. The next thing we're going to talk about is book sharing. So book sharing is if we talk about a book to a child. We're not reading the story. We may read the story, but book sharing is very, very specifically talking about the book that we have, talking about the page in front of us, talking about some of the text, but it is a pre-reading skill. It is a pre-reading strategy that we use, and we will continue to use until children are fluent, confident readers. And then we still may use book sharing or a pre-reading strategy to improve children's reading and improve their potential for comprehension tests and the type of learning that they'll do. So we'll talk about book sharing, we'll talk about storytelling, then regular reading a story. So regular reading a story is you literally are opening a book, and then you're going to read it to the child, which we'll also talk about and give you examples. So that's normal reading of a story. For deaf teachers and teachers of the deaf, reading a story is, whether you do it in sign language or not, you're still reading the story, and then you'll put it into sign. So you're looking at it and you're reading exactly what is there and translating it into South African Sign Language. You're not telling the story. You're not sharing the story. So for even in deaf education, no matter what language you speak, and we're talking about translanguaging and using different languages in the class, book reading is reading. You're not storytelling, and we'll look at that. We're going to look at how to use experience books. An experience book is literally taking your life experience, what's happening in the class, and turn it into little books. And then I'm going to talk about linking life to literacy, a very, very important strategy to make sure that life all around us links to literacy. I want you to have your own books in your class. So for example, I have a book here with me on Everyone's Normal. So I would literally, if we were in a class, I would every now and then open my own book and read, because we want to be able to show our learners that we also read. And even if you don't love reading, you can pretend to love reading, because we cannot expect our children to learn to read if we don't love reading. And then, of course, we want to make sure that we've got books around us. We want to have a little library or a bookshelf in our class. We want to be bringing in magazines. So if you're a reader, or you've got the newspaper from the Sunday Times or the Mail and Guardian, the Sowetan, you want to be bringing in books, magazines, newspapers. You want to be displaying the magic of books, the magic of text around you. And then ultimately, we want to create and spark that joy and magic in the child, and then follow the child's lead, which is a very, very fundamental strategy when we teach, particularly when we teach little ones. So we're talking about literacy birth to 6, birth to 9. So if you're working with children from birth until about 9, particularly we're hoping to look at like birth to 5 and 6, you're going to have text around you all the time, and it's never too early to start to read. So I started reading with my children. I think I had my boy had his first book when he was 6 months old, and I was reading to him because we're modeling all the time. So let's get cracking. I'm going to start with storytelling and reading, and we're going to put them side by side so you can see the difference between telling a story and the value of telling a story and reading a book. And you cannot confuse the two. The two are very, very different. They can be mixed, they can be used, but they are separate entities. Storytelling does not necessarily link to literacy, but neither does reading a book if we don't do it correctly. So I'm going to start by doing a basic telling you a story, and I'm telling you a story as if you're the children now, and I'm doing it in preparation because I'm going to show you this book later. It may be tomorrow or the next day. So I'm going to be just showing you how I would physically do it in the class. I am recording this workshop for you to look at afterwards if you would like, if you don't want to take notes. So I know I'm going to be looking at this book tomorrow, and so I'm going to start telling a story. Oh my word, boys and girls, come and sit with us. I like them close to me. I want them to be comfortable. So I'm going to have them on the mat in front of me with little pillows, just comfort. We're wanting to create joy. And then as the children get older, they learn to sit at tables and chairs. But when they're very, very small, we're sitting outside on the grass, under the tree. We're sitting in comfortable places. I'm creating joy. I would love to tell you a story about quite a lot of animals that I love. One day there was an antelope or a buck. We call it, and so I would use the sign, and I'd maybe talk, but this buck loved to run, and he ran all around the field as fast as he could. He practiced every day, and he always did his best, but he loved to win. When he lost, he used to get in a gruff, and he used to get very, very angry, and he used to fall on the floor and stamp his legs and shout and cry. But he was a very fast runner. And every morning he would wake up and practice and practice and practice. He had a friend, and his friend was called Mr. Baboon. And Mr. Baboon didn't like running at all. Mr. Baboon liked watching Mr. Antelope run around the field. But Mr. Baboon loved braais, and he used to braai boerewors, he used to braai chops, he used to make pap, and he loved eating. And so every day after Mr. Antelope was finished practicing, Mr. Baboon would call Mr. Antelope and say, come and have some boerewors. So that is an example of how I would tell a story. I might do repetition. I use, obviously, we talk about when we work with little children, we talk about really little children, motherese, or using a lot of expression, facial expression. This is not just for deaf children. Okay, so we talk about using our facial expression in our hands when we sign, but whenever you work with little children, you are using your voice, intonation, exaggeration, and we're doing it slowly and sometimes repetitively, a little bit like poetry, and the whole time you're keeping the children's attention. That's why I like them close, and we're leaning forward. We're making sure that we are interesting, that we are saying it in a fun way. So you want to make sure that you're an interesting storyteller. The only way to know if you're an interesting storyteller is to tell a friend, tell children, and then ask them for input. If you're not a good storyteller, then you need to practice. You need to be a spectacular storyteller if you're going to work with children. So now that I've shown you how to tell a story. Now I'm going to read you the story. So I'm going to take out the book and go, boys and girls, quickly come and sit. I want to read you a story. Very exciting story. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? So I have my book with me. If I am going to do it in sign language for our deaf children, then I want to make sure that the book is up in front of me in a place that is not visually distracting or blocking the deaf learners, so slightly to the side. But the deaf children need to see the book in front of me, and they need to see that I'm reading. They need to see that it is not a story being told, that I'm reading a story. Please make sure your sound is off. Trying to manage it. If anyone else sees, you're welcome to switch the sound off. So I've got it. If you're telling a story to hearing children where you don't need both your hands to sign, then you would hold the book in front of you. And then, of course, we want to show the pictures once we've read it. Or if you're a teacher in little classes, you want to be able to have pictures quite big, ready to show the children, or you can have a big book. So that means you would spend a little bit of money investing in making pages bigger if you want the around at story time, but also having books of different shapes and sizes. So I've got books of different shapes and sizes with me so that we can show children that books come in different shapes and sizes. So I am going to read it to you. And Keta is going to pretend she's reading it. In other words, we're going to look at the book and then going to read it to make sure that they are seeing that we're reading it. One day, Antelope arrives at athletics. It's noontime, and he is going to run. He runs very, very fast around the track. And then I will show the children the picture. This one happens to have sign language ABC. And then I would show. At this point, I am not speaking. Once I've read the text, I'm showing them the visuals so as not to distract. The children are going to look. They want to come forward. They want to touch it. That's fine. We're patient with them. We want them to experience it. But Antelope had a friend, and his name was Mr. Baboon. Mr. Baboon loved to eat boerewors. Mr. Baboon, please switch your video off. He loved to braai boerewors, and he braaid every day. And he would share his boerewors with his friend, Mr. Antelope, but he was also friends with Mr. Buffalo. Then I'll show it. And I'll show it. I may go, there's Mr. Buffalo. There's Mr. Baboon. Show it. So that's the difference between telling a story and then reading a story. In deaf education, you spend more time looking at it and then signing it so they can see you reading it and then signing it. You could even use your finger to show that you're reading it. And then if you're using code switching or translanguaging multilingualism, I've got a cat that comes in and out here, sorry. You may have a book only in English, and then you may then translate it into your the language of your class, the language of learning and teaching. And so they'll also then see, but don't limit yourself to only using books in your language if you don't have nice books yet. Making sure that you choose excellent books, even if you have to translate them. Because in deaf education, we're having to translate all our reading into South African Sign Language as we read it to the children until they're able to see it in English. So that's storytelling, brief example, then book reading. Now, if I were to do this as book sharing, I would go, oh my word, look at this. What is this book about? So now we're doing what we call pre-literacy strategies and book sharing, very important for little children. So I would probably do each one of these at different times, but book sharing is important because we get children to participate more. What do you see on the page? What do you think the story's about? Who sees the rhino? Can you see the rhino? So we're asking children questions. We're asking them for responses. But a lot of the time, we're not saying, yes, Jenny, yes, Paul, yes, Mandla. We're asking questions and then we're asking them to think about it and point. Do you see a bird? I think he's pecking at something. What do you think he's eating? And so now we're showing and modeling for them through book sharing the ability to look at something and think your own thoughts. Now, this is part of what we call theory of mind, and we'll talk about theory of mind. So theory of mind is also called TOM. So it's theory of mind. Theory of mind is a strategy that is needed to be in place. It's an abstract thought ability in order to read. So we're not following the text. We're not telling you a story. We're using the literacy tool, the book, but we're talking about it and we're allowing children to think their own thoughts. Kate, are you there? There you are. We want them to think their own thoughts because in order to be a successful reader, you have to bring your own thoughts into the class. You have to bring your own thinking into the process. That's how you become a good reader. Good thinkers become good readers. And we want our children to be good thinkers. Anyway, even if they don't learn to read in our class. So it's talking about the book. Oh my word, what is Buffalo doing? I think he's hungry. Do you think he's hungry? What is he eating? Here it's boerewors. We could also go, why is Baboon sitting nearby? Do you think they're friends? I don't think they're friends. I don't think they're friends because they're not talking to each other. What do you think? Baboon's looking quite lonely. Talk, talk, talk. That is book sharing. Now, this is a very simple book. If we wanted to do book sharing with a more complex book, I would start book sharing on the cover page. And when we do cover page, the cover page is a preparation for what's inside the book. And that's a pre-literacy strategy. When we start doing pre-literacy strategy, we talk about the cover and like, what do you think the story's about? And we talk about it. Where is the author? There is the author's name. How many pages? Let's look. So if we were doing book sharing, I'm going to choose a page just because it's a page where we can ask a question. We're looking at this page and we're going, what do you think is happening here? I wonder, does she look happy? No, she's sad. And get the kids to talk, get the kids to participate. But I wonder why she's sad. Now, I wonder why, thinking about some potential also theory of mind strategy, which we'll talk about. I wonder why she's sad. Why do you think? Who's sitting on the chair nearby? I think they've noticed. And then what do you see? What's happening? And we get them to talk about it. We might then even say, do you think it's his mom? Oh, yes, maybe it's his gogo. Maybe it's the teacher. Why would the teacher be sitting outside with little Jabu? So it's literally just talking about the book. So it's book sharing. Book sharing is one of the fundamental building blocks for establishing reading and literacy. Now the next one, so we've done storytelling, making sure that we know the difference between storytelling and reading a book in any language, South African Sign Language or any spoken language. Book sharing. And then now it's about experience books. Now, experience books, there's actually two things. It's experiencing books. So we want to have books and paper and literature all around the class. We've got things on our walls. We want to have books available. We want to have magazines available. We want our children to experience books and touch them. So that means we need to teach them strategies of making sure that our little hands are clean. We need to be respectful of books. But at the same time, we don't want to be that pedantic that our children never experience and touch books. So if they've not had books and access to library books and reading at home, they're not going to understand. So we want their little hands to be clean. We want them to be respectful. You turn one page at a time. But at the same time, it's more important initially that they touch and experience books than that they have clean hands. So it's bringing the joy of reading without making them scared and fearful. So an example of experiencing books is making sure that you have some little books on a bookshelf. It can be a small bookshelf. Now, most schools have little libraries, but you want to have it in your class. You want to have some books in your class. So every time you go to a church fete, some kind of a market, secondhand bookshops, you want to buy your own little set of books or start asking people to donate. So for the ECD colleagues in the Department of Education, DBE, I've been posting sets of books for these little ECD classrooms to start their own little library. If you're in a regular school, you already have a library, but you want to make sure that you have books available in a little section so that people know, that the little kiddies know that there's a little library, and you want to make it fun and gorgeous. But you also want to now, we talk about linking life to literacy. We also want to make sure that literacy is seen everywhere. Oh, guys, I've got to put my eye drops in. It's time. It's time. Clocks and watches are literacy. So we're showing them, okay, it's 1 o'clock. I've got to get my eye drops. I must read it and see to make sure that I know how many drops to put in. It says, So the children could be doing their work, or I could be doing it with them, but I just want to model that. It says, put in 1 drop in each eye. Put in 1 drop in each eye. They need to see that there is literacy all around us. So they've seen it there. Someone brings me a Christmas present. Oh, my word. Thank you. Thank you, Katlejo. This is beautiful. What's inside the box? Theory of mind question, thinking about what could come. Then I read, it's hand cream, and it says the flavor is lavender. I wonder what lavender. So I'm reading what's on a box. I'm drinking something out of my cup and I'm drinking and I'm going, oh, I didn't notice. It's got my name on it or whatever. So kids are seeing writing everywhere. They're already seeing the Spaza shop name. They're already seeing Wimpy. They're already seeing McDonald's. Text is all around us, but we need to make it real, or they don't really know that they're reading McDonald's. They just know that they're recognizing the brand. So bringing the world around them, making life, linking life to literacy. Okay. Then we spoke about experiencing books, having them around. But we want to also have experience books. Now, an experience book is when something is experienced. You have done something, they have done something. There is an experience that's happened, and we're talking about little children now. And now we want to put that into writing. We want to create an experience book, because everyone likes their story, likes their lives, and read things that are important to them. So we always need to have spare paper, whether it's paper that someone donates you or you've got X-pads. But let's give an example. We get to school and everyone's there and we're so exciting, but someone's got plaster on their finger. Now, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, everyone's like, oh my word, what's on your finger? everyone's running around, everyone wants to talk about it. So number one, we're storytelling. We're talking about life. Oh my word, what happened to your finger? Tell us. So, and this is how every class should be. I don't care if you're a matric teacher, a grade 8 teacher, or teaching 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. We want to care about our learners. We just make it shorter, more intense when we've got older children. But it's like, oh my word, what happened to your finger? Tell us the story. Getting a child to tell you about what's happened is fundamental in creating their own stories. If you are unable to tell someone what's happened, if you're unable to put together your thought processes into language, whether it's spoken English, Xhosa, or South African Sign Language, if you can't tell someone something in language, then it's going to be really hard to develop reading skills. So now we've got to know, we have children that are language depleted, language delayed. We've got children that are multilingual. So kids are coming to our classrooms, if they're growing up, for example, in Alex, they're growing up around 4, 5, 6 spoken languages. So they may understand a lot, but they're not speaking very well yet, or they're delayed because they're learning 4, 5, 6 languages. If they are deaf children and they've only recently arrived at school and their parents are hearing, they haven't learned sign language yet. So then they don't have much sign language. Or if you're in a bilingual classroom and your kiddies are growing up in a Zulu environment, but the school has chosen that this is an English medium school, kids may understand your English, but they're not yet able to tell the story in English because they're Zulu first language speakers. So we want to be able to allow them the opportunity to speak and say it. They can act it out. They can dramatize it, because drama is life. Creating drama and fun is what creates love of learning. And so, oh my word, what happened to you? Why is there a plaster on your finger? So I'm going to now put a plaster on my finger so you can see. Now we're going to talk about this plaster on my finger. So if your child is language delayed, you're going to be asking them questions. What happened? What is that? Plaster. Children may not know the word for plaster, whether it's the sign for plaster or the English or Zulu word for plaster. We know what it is, but it's not yet sufficient abstract thought because you have no label for it. So we give things labels. It's a plaster. Why? What happened? Hopefully the child will be able to tell you, I fell and I knocked my finger and it was bleeding and there was blood everywhere. Okay. If your child doesn't yet know enough English, get them to tell you in Zulu. If your child is able to do some broken signs, let them do it. You've got to keep asking questions to pull the language out of them because we want them to participate, and you're going to mirror it with good, strong language. And if the child needs to mime it, then they need to mime it. Even if children of 3 years old have got fantastic language, we love acting everything out. That is what role play is. And that's why all the famous TV programs for 3, 4, 5-year-olds have acting and singing and dancing, because that's what children need. So, oh my word, he bumped his finger and it was bleeding. The blood was pouring, drip, drip, drip. I do this for hearing kids, not only for signing. So it's like, oh my word, it was bleeding and we had to stop the bleeding. Are you okay? What color is blood? Oh my word. Then, of course, if your kids are very hyper and excitable, we won't speak too excitingly, but then we stop the blood, then we put the plaster on. Is it still sore? Then everyone's had a look at it, and now we're going to do an experience page, an experience book. So we're going to go, oh my word, we're going to draw a picture of Johnny. Or every child will draw their own picture. Johnny's going to draw himself, and he's going to draw where he fell, and he's going to draw the blood on his finger. So an experience page or experience book is going to look something like, there's Johnny, his hand, and there is the plaster. So what ideally you want to do, you want to be able to either have a plaster in the classroom, or you want to draw a different color, but I would literally want to do the plaster on his finger. And then we might have to do a slightly bigger finger on his finger. There is his hand. And then what the experience book then does, and this is the magic, is where we then add English, or the language of learning and teaching, to his experience page. So it's going to be him. So he's going to talk about my, okay? So what should we say, Johnny? What happened? I fell and hurt my finger. Then that's one page, one line. It could even be less. We could even go, ouch. Ouch. If that's what we're wanting to teach them, ouch, ain't then that's his page. Johnny then gets this page, and that then becomes part of his little book. We put holes in it, and we could put string around it, and that child then, each child then wants to have their own experience book. And slowly but surely, one page a week, one page every day or so, don't aim too high, slowly but surely, they build up. And each child then has their own book of experiences. They have their own experience book. And very often, if they finish their work, they can go and look at their own experience book and they will turn the page. Now, the drawings, initially, if they can't draw yet, we can help them. But even little ones can hold, even if before that, they can hold and they can do a little bit of a scratch and tickle with it. We want them to participate, even if it's a scrunchy paper, because this is their experience page and they get to remember that was the day I cut my finger. It was so sore. I fell and hurt my finger. And that text will be with that. And that then becomes his personal. People love their own personal stories. And so that is an experience book. We can then get children to read their experience books to each other. So then we're taking reading and the link to storytelling, because he's already told his friends the story about his finger and getting the plaster. He can then go around the room and then read everyone his story. He can read, he can make it up. He doesn't have to remember what we've written, but he's then reading, acting out the role of reading. So we're making reading real to them. And then finally, is making newspapers and magazines. Children are hearing what's going on in the world. We choose what we share with our children because we want to manage the world for them, but they're hearing it. And so our role is to bring the world into the classroom in a safe way. We manage it safely and we link it to literacy. So in the U magazine, now I was looking at it going, oh my word, what should I show everyone, the U magazine? We don't want to make it popularist because not everyone is going to know the actress. Not everyone's going to know this couple that got married, but everyone knows a dog. So I'm going to look at the magazine and go, oh, let's read about this man and his dog. Okay, so I'm going to choose something that all children know about, that all children understand. And then we're going to do a little bit of free literacy skills, talking about what we see, a little bit of what we call book sharing. What color is the dog? Do we think the dog is a boy dog or a girl dog? And we're going to talk about it. Now, are we ready? Let's read the story. So I've got this book in front of me and I'm going to be reading it, meaning if you're, again, like we remind ourselves, if we're in a school for the deaf, we're going to make sure that we read and then read the story. So we're going to put it into sign language in sign language structure, but we're making sure that they can see us reading it and then putting it into sign language. You're going to be reading in English. Kate's brother's name is James. James loves dogs. James has a pet dog, and his pet dog's name is Ella. Ella the dog. Okay, so that's reading. I would typically, when children are really small, bring in some book sharing. Oh my word, who else has a dog? And then I'll talk to the children. So I'm going to be bringing in book sharing and linking it to them. Who else has a dog? Oh no, I don't have a dog, I've got a cat. Oh my word, what's your cat's name? But ahead of time, you're preparing. So you know what the aim is of this. You could have news ring, morning ring every morning. And depending on what your aim is, you'd have more book sharing, bringing in stories of their own, or you might just want to talk about the story of the reading of the dog. Because later we're going to do a clay man and a dog. We're going to paint a dog. We're going to maybe do colors, black and brown. So it depends what your aim is. Sometimes we read just for fun and bring in book, but literacy is always linked to what we're doing, whether it's art, dance, playing outside, whether we're doing sand time, physical education, we're learning subjects depending on your class. So that is bringing magazines and newspapers. Of course, there is also the question of how much do we bring in about world news and current news? The children are hearing. So if it's democracy voting time, we might talk about it. We might not read it out of a newspaper, but we'll bring some key things, key visuals. If we know our children are hearing about the war and fighting, we have time to talk. We do need to be telling stories and allowing our children to talk. If we know what they're talking about, that's when we talk about following the child's lead. So we don't want to just talk about war, but if our children are already talking about they heard this and they heard this, so we can then say, do we want to talk about it? We want to we might even then do a really simple example of an experience page of a little boy who lives in Israel and his name is Shuli. But we use literacy and books to facilitate the world around them, making it safe and comfortable and manageable, whilst we develop literacy and reading skills. So let's remind ourselves, we have now done storytelling and the value of storytelling in a class. Storytelling can be anything, educational, about life, but it's really important to tell stories just because we are a storytelling nation. South Africa, in its rainbow nation, we tell stories. It is part of what we do, deaf and hearing cultures. We also link stories that we tell and hear to writing. Storytelling builds our visual and auditory memory because you have to hold the information that you're listening to. As a teacher, you're keeping eye contact because you want to make sure the children are following you. So you are working double when you're in the class. You're reading a story, telling a story. You're the whole time you're watching and monitoring the children. If you need to slow down, repeat a sign. 3 or 4 of the children are looking away, scratching, picking their noses. Then they look back at you. Then you repeat it. We book share by talking about the book. We can talk about colors in the book. We can count. Oh my word, how many birds can we count? 1, 2. We count the birds. We get them involved. They put their little fingers on the pages. Then we read a story. Then we create experience pages about what's happening in our lives. Sometimes if it's a boring class and nothing happens, then you're going to have to pretend that you fall, or you're going to have to pretend that you've messed something on your shirt. Oh! And then we write an experience page about my teacher messed juice on her shirt. But they learn that anything important that has happened, we write down, we link to literacy, we bring literacy to life. And then reading our own book. So it's tea time, it's everyone going out to play, and then I bring out my book that I'm going to read at tea time. So I need to show that I enjoy reading. I can't force children to read if I don't ever read. Even if you're not a reader, you're going to pretend to be a reader because we want to be able to model for the children that we read, even if it's for a very short time. You're going to sit outside under the tree while they're playing and you're going to read and you've got to show enjoyment. So you can pretend to enjoy reading if you don't yet like reading. And then it's sharing stuff about what you've read. So sometimes it's making reading fun. I have found something. I found a secret. Or someone gave me a present. It's a scarf. And there's writing on my scarf. What does it say? So we're always linking things, but naturally to reading. We don't want to overdo it, but it's natural. And children are drawn to stories and books. And if you're a teacher of excellence and you're reading and sharing stories and have books around you, your children will learn to love. So this is part 1. It's 20 to 2 and we've finished part 1. Basic introduction to some of the fundamental concepts, which we can then go into, and I can do a lecture of 2 to 3 hours per item. That's how deep they go, which we won't do. But what we want to make sure is that we understand the range of tools and strategies we have at our disposal to begin to develop literacy. In the early years, it takes a long time. But we don't want to waste time because we've got to teach the curriculum. We've got to teach maths. We can't push and teach too fast if our children still can't read and write, or if our children don't understand what we're telling them. So initially, as we build foundations, it goes slowly. But as you build momentum, it goes faster and faster and faster. And remembering that the classroom with books and paper is fun and light-hearted. They cannot be fearful of the books and what they see around them. So now I'm going to open up for questions. Does anyone have a question that they would like to pop in the Q&A or in the notes section? You're welcome to pop a question in the notes section. You can put on your audio, your voice if you want to, and then I've got some questions for you later, but let's stop there. Any questions that you have that you'd like to ask about the fundamental concepts we've just started sharing as we begin to introduce literacy to our hearing and deaf children in this multilingual country of South Africa? Any questions? Let me go to the notes section to see if anyone has written any notes. Chat. There you are. So yes, there is a recording. We will make the recording available, and the recording will have both myself and the sign language interpreter on. What type of books? We can read any type of books with our children. We want to make sure that the books are visual. And although I want books to be inclusive, if I've only got books about boys and I've got a school of boys and girls, so be it. I'd rather expose them to books than not expose them to books because they happen to not be inclusive. I always make sure that I have books with children that are different. They've got hearing aids. This little girl, I've got children, I want to show you on the playground. We've got children in wheelchairs. We've got children with canes. This little girl's got a broken leg. I want to always make sure that the books and documents I use are inclusive, but we can't force it if they're not. I also want books to be beautiful. So I tend not to have yucky, rubbish books. Who wants to read a yucky, rubbish book? So I'd rather have less books. Make sure the books that I have are shiny and lovely and gorgeous. So I'm sending out a whole lot of books to set up these ECD libraries that we're setting up. If you're in a classroom, in a school, make sure that you get your books. Are there any more questions before I put out the questionnaire, the poll for you guys to answer? Let me go to the polls. So we now have, I would like to ask you some questions about what we know about literacy and reading for parts 2 and 3 as we go on. This should now come up. Preview. No questions. Masechaba. Which of the strategies do you know the least amount? What would you like me to do next time? Is there something specific, a specific book you've always had challenges? I'm trying to find how to upload my poll. Poll. You have no polls, quizzes. All your polls, quizzes, and surveys are available for this meeting. Create. So it's got about 8 questions. And quizzes. Here is it. Surveys and polls. There it is. How come I can't show you? Here to create a poll. Okay, there it is. Oh, maybe I should preview. No, there it is. Publish. Can you see it? If you go down to your polls, so you click on the 3 little dots at the bottom of your page and go to polls and quizzes. Is the poll and quiz there? Because I've now prepared it. Can you see it? Keita, can you see it? No. Okay. Also write down any of your questions. Meeting and configure the surveys. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Don't worry. So basically, one of the questions is, which one do I use most often? Storytelling, book reading, book sharing, experience books, and linking life to literacy. Which one of those do you use most in your class? Even if you didn't know that was what it was called. Jot it in the notes section today, in your chats. And then we'll close finally. Oh, well, guys, won't go. How weird. Because there it is. I can see it. Which strategies are you using, or which is the most challenging? Why is it so hard? Why are our children, when we looked at the Pearls results recently, it did not differentiate between black and white kids, English and Afrikaans kids, deaf kids. The reading levels in South Africa, according to the Pearls, is extremely, extremely low. Now, we've already seen that no matter we're first language, second language speakers, literacy is at our fingertips and it's free. It doesn't have to cost us money. What are we doing in our classes to create those literacy opportunities for our learners? Any questions? We mostly use storybooks. I use storytelling the most. Good. So storytelling is amazing. But remember, if we don't take stories and link it to literacy, then it just remains a story. So storytelling is really, really important. And sometimes it's important just for being a story. But we do need to make sure that there is making a link to literacy and making a link to reading. Let's write down that story, which is the first step of literacy, is kind of putting it in writing and then reading it. So yes, a lot of you are saying storytelling is one of the fundamental tools you use, and especially if you're working with littlies. It's wonderful. Let's make sure that we're not just telling stories that are boring. You need to prepare your story. So whether you're telling the story of this or the 3 little pigs, you need to make sure that your story is better than it is. Are you telling them about the big, hawky, pink pigs? In other words, are you using literary strategies? Are you describing the pigs? Are they just running as fast as they can? Or are they running and panting and sweating because they run so fast? So are you using good, strong, rich language? If you don't know enough synonyms for running fast, then you go and do the preparation by looking in your dictionary. Every teacher has a dictionary close to them, a thesaurus close to them, or you've got your phone where you can search it. What are synonyms for fast? speedily. He ran as speedily and as fast as his little legs could carry. Sounds better than he ran fast. So you're making sure that you are using rich, beautiful language when you're telling stories. Is ECD able to work for special needs children as well? Glenn, I started this workshop seminar for teachers with special needs. Yes. That's when you have to prepare even more to make sure your storytelling is better. Your storytelling techniques are better. You're using rich language. Storytelling and early literacy book sharing is the funnest when you've got special needs children. It's the funnest when you've got special needs children because there's less pressure on them passing grade double R. We can just focus on enriching their lives and giving them stimulating experiences. So yes, this is working with our children, not just ECD, but literacy, pre-reading, and book sharing and storytelling works for children in special needs ECD. Nice question. Thanks, Glenn. During storytelling, asking questions, yes, it's a good strategy, but sometimes we want to just tell the story because we want to build up their memory, their ability to concentrate, and short-term memory, visual memory or auditory memory. So sometimes we just tell the story and then ask afterwards. As a teacher of special needs, how do I build vocabulary other than using pictures? We use richer language. And so we act out. Remember, we said smaller children, and this is not for special needs children. Any children like acting out and model. And that's why I just love teaching little ones, because they love that. But we can show running, and then we can show speeding. We can show the difference between jogging. So we use rich language. And if we're going to introduce 5 new words or the vocab, or 5 new synonyms or antonyms or adjectives, then we use those words a few times that week. We do repetition because children learn through repetition. Pictures are wonderful. Having our phones and showing little videos, showing little snippets of what does it look like to be sweating. If maybe there isn't a sign for, or the kids have never heard the word sweating in English. What does it look like? Or if everyone knows the sign for sweating, what is the English word for sweating? Is he sweating, or is he sweating profusely? It was dripping everywhere and his shirt was wet. No, his shirt was sopping wet. So we bring in rich language. Pictures are fun, but pictures are static. And so I would also just be bringing in rich language when we're telling stories and when we're talking about it. But pictures are definitely a good strategy. Any more questions? So if you enjoyed the workshop and you think you've learned something today, whether it's 1 thing or 10 things, pop your thumbs up if you've learned something. In the reactions and emotions, so you go right down to your reactions and you can pop a little thumbs up like I've got there. If you feel like you've learned something today, if you've got any other questions that you have, we can use visual images without using words, but that's not linking to literacy. When I'm talking about the magic of books and literacy, that's what I'm focusing on. That's why only telling stories and only using pictures has got nothing to do with literacy. The only way pictures are of any value in developing literacy is if we use this as a book sharing. What do we see? Oh my word, why is he standing there? He looks so lonely. But no, pictures don't link to literacy at all. And so I would not just use pictures. It's about making sure that we're linking to literacy and talking about literacy. But pictures are valuable on their own. High Hopes program and EC training for creche for ages 0 to 5. High Hopes is a home-based program, but we're very much interested, and High Hopes is the sign, hey, High Hopes. We're very much interested in supporting creches and in any type of homeschool creche. So do let us know, Atta. if you want to let us know the contact details, we definitely are wanting to help and support. We want our children to be school ready by the time they are 3 and 4. We want them to be ready. We want them to be school ready. So as we start saying goodbye, thank you for coming. We'll be introducing our next workshop, and they're going to be always 1 hour or less. So this one was 45 minutes with some time for questions and chatting. Thank you so much for coming. I will be sending out the link to this workshop so that you can watch the video to everyone I sent the invitation to. So whoever's invited you to the workshop will be able to share the link with you. Thank you so much for coming. And I look forward to teaching you more about storytelling and reading books in ways to enhance our children's language, enhance their vocabulary, and enrich. If you're going to be getting books from the donations for your ECD class, please send us photographs of your children reading those books. Please make sure you send us photographs so we can see the children enjoying the books. Thanks for coming. You're welcome to pop on your video and wave goodbye. Gallery. Thanks for coming. Thanks, Glenn. Pelile. Thanks, Esther. Nosikelo. Thank you, Cynthia. Thanks, Esther. Keta, thank you for interpreting for us. Thanks, Mpumi. Thanks, Mfundo. Thanks, Cynthia. Thanks, Mpumi. Thanks, Atta. Thanks, Iskon. I don't know your first name. Yingisani, thank you. Thank you. Teboho, thank you for being here. Thank you. Thanks, Tandi Ngema. Thank you, thank you. We'll be doing much more of this reading. We're get our children reading and get our literacy levels up. Thank you, Audrey. Thanks, Cabello. Thanks, Pamela, Shezi. Thank you very much, guys. I will stop recording now and then send everyone. Thank you for coming. And I'll send the link out to everyone. Thank you to our interpreter. Bye, guys.